The transmission came in raw, unfiltered, and soaked in horror. Valoris Prime burned. The skies choked on black smoke. The proud warrior cries of the Valoran were drowned in the thunder of orbital bombardment, their mighty citadels crumbling under the merciless onslaught of 10,000 Solari-class warships. And then, across every galactic channel, the Council's voice rang with cold arrogance. Let this be a lesson. No one defies our will and lives. Humanity disagreed. Deep in the void of space, aboard the warship Indomitable, Commander Elias Voss leaned forward, eyes locked on the massacre. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a snarl. More a promise. You want to teach a lesson? He muttered. Fine. Let's see if you bastards can handle ours. He turned to his bridge crew. Full burn. We're taking the fleet straight into hell. And hell followed. The transmission cut through every secured line like a jagged blade, the cold voice of the Galactic Council echoing across the frequencies. Let this be a lesson. No one defies our will and lives. Commander Elias Voss sat rigid in his command chair aboard the Indomitable, his knuckles whitening around the armrests. The holographic display before him showed Valoris Prime, a planet of fire, crumbling cities, and dying warriors. The once mighty Valoran, Earth's only true allies, were being wiped from existence. Voss took a slow breath, his jaw clenching. He turned to his communications officer. Tell me this isn't a live feed. The ensign swallowed. It's live, sir. Valoris Prime is burning right now. The bridge fell silent. Even among the most hardened officers of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet, there was something gut-wrenching about watching an entire people be systematically erased. A calculated massacre. Voss exhaled, tilting his head to one side. I assume the brass wants us to sit on our hands and watch? The strategic officer shifted uncomfortably. Official orders, sir. The Council classified this as an internal disciplinary action. Engaging would mean direct war. Voss leaned forward. Internal disciplinary action? He let the words roll off his tongue like venom. That's what we're calling genocide now. No one answered. He stared at the holographic battlefield, the Council's Solari-class warships blotting out the Valoran's final line of defense. If Earth did nothing, the Valoran wouldn't just lose this battle. They'd be erased from history. Voss pushed up from his chair. We have a fleet, don't we? The ensign hesitated. Sir, if we act without approval, Earth will thank us when we win. His voice was steel. And if we lose, they'll disown us, pretend we were rogue. Either way, I'm not watching this slaughter. The officers exchanged glances, silent questions and answers passing between them. The crew of the Indomitable wasn't made up of bureaucrats. These were warriors. Fighters. And Voss had led them long enough for them to know exactly what was about to happen. The ensign turned back to his console. Relaying orders to the fleet, sir. The Admiralty might have called it treason. Voss called it justice. His command crackled across the ships, cutting through hesitation like a blade. All ships, combat formation. Silent running. We are ghosts. We move in, we strike, and we leave nothing but wreckage in our wake. Engines darkened. Scanners flickered off. The first expeditionary fleet became invisible. Through the wreckage of Valoran's moons, they moved unseen, slipping into the graveyard of broken warships. The enemy was too busy massacring a planet to notice them coming. Voss watched, waiting. Counting. The enemy was methodical, predictable, just as he needed them to be. He locked onto a cluster of Solari warships, their backs turned to his fleet as they rained fire upon Valoran's last defenses. All ships fire at will. The void erupted in hellfire. Earth's warships decloaked, railguns launching kinetic lances that tore through enemy hulls before they could even react. Torpedoes streaked through the darkness, detonating shields with pinpoint precision. The enemy didn't even register the attack until 30 warships were already gone. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Scanners lit up, searching for an opponent that had already buried its knives in their backs. The Council's flagship opened a channel, the Admiral's voice laced with fury. You dare interfere? Voss smirked. Oh, I dare, all right. A blast from the Indomitable's main gun tore through the flagship's left flank, venting it into space. Let's see how you handle fighting someone who actually fights back. The enemy scrambled to reorganize. Too late. Voss's fleet had sliced into their formation, weaving between their lines with surgical precision. One by one, the mighty Solari warships fell, torn apart not by numbers, but by superior tactics. The enemy had size. Voss had strategy. He baited them into firing at decoy beacons, tricked them into chasing false targets, then cut them down when they overextended. But the Council had numbers. No matter how many Earth destroyed, more kept coming. A voice cut through the chaos, his tactical officer shouting. New energy signatures! Massive fleet entering system! Voss's smirk faded. Reinforcements. The holographic display lit up with hundreds of new enemy ships. They were outnumbered 20-1 now. Sir? The ensign's voice cracked. Orders? Voss didn't hesitate. We go for the throat. Their numbers mean nothing if we cut off the head. He turned to his weapons officer. What's their command ship? The officer scoured the display, then pointed. That one. Largest ship. Coordinating their movements. If we take it out, the whole fleet loses cohesion. Voss nodded. Then that's our target. He opened a fleet-wide transmission. All ships converge on the command vessel. We break their spine, or we die trying. Engines roared to life. The fleet surged forward, cutting through waves of enemy fire to punch a hole straight for the command ship. A turret round glanced off the Indomitable's hull, rattling the deck beneath Voss's feet. Alarms blared, but he didn't slow down. Forward batteries, focus on that ship. I want its shields down. Gunfire screamed through the void. Torpedoes slammed into shields that flickered under the barrage. Then a breach. Hit them again! Another round pierced their reactor core. The enemy flagship shuddered, fire spewing from its hull. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then, the enemy fleet collapsed. Their once coordinated fire became erratic, ships pulling back, breaking formation, trying to regroup. And that's when Voss unleashed hell. All ships, take them apart. Earth's warships descended like wolves into a scattered flock. One by one, the enemy fell. What was supposed to be an execution of the Valoran had become a slaughter of the Council's forces. And Earth had just proven a point. Voss leaned back, exhaling, watching what was left of the once mighty Solari fleet retreating in disgrace. A call came through, one of the Valoran generals, battered but alive. You came for us. His voice was raw with emotion. Even when the rest of the galaxy turned away, you came. Voss cracked a rare grin. Yeah. Well, you owe me a drink. The general laughed, then his voice turned serious. They won't forget this. Voss's grin faded. No, he agreed. They won't. And neither would he. The silence on the bridge was deafening, only broken by the rhythmic hum of the ship's reactor. Smoke curled from a console where a power surge had fried its circuits. The Indomitable had taken a beating, but it was still in the fight. Elias Voss wiped the blood trickling down his brow and focused on the main display. The Council's fleet was in shambles, but they weren't done yet. They never went down easy. A voice crackled over comms. Enemy ships are reorganizing, sir. Looks like they're preparing for a second wave. Voss exhaled through his nose, his mind already racing through possibilities. They're desperate. We rattled them, but they've still got numbers. They'll throw everything they have to turn this around. A tactical officer called out, urgency in his tone. Multiple warp signatures detected, reinforcements inbound. A new cluster of red markers swarmed onto the holodisplay. Hundreds of fresh enemy warships. More than they could handle. The bridge crew stiffened. Someone muttered a curse under their breath. Voss didn't flinch. He had expected this. He turned to his comms officer. Open a channel to the fleet. The officer nodded. Channel opened, sir. Voss's voice was cold steel. Listen up. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on options. But I don't need options. I need kills. The enemy thinks we're going to run, but they don't know us. We don't retreat. We don't break. We burn them down before they even know what hit them. A low murmur of agreement spread through the bridge. Orders, sir? His XO asked. Voss cracked his knuckles. We take out their command structure. Cut the head off the snake before it strikes. The officer at the targeting console hesitated. Sir, the new flagship is heavily shielded. It's got layered defenses and a fleet surrounding it. We can't break through fast enough. Voss studied the display. He could see the problem. The Council's new flagship wasn't just a battleship. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a wall of escorts. The usual approach wouldn't work. He smirked. Good. Let's cheat. A few officers exchanged nervous glances. They had learned long ago that when Voss smiled before a battle, something insane was about to happen. He pointed at the holo display. We need to get close. Indomitable's main batteries can punch through those shields at point-blank range. The XO frowned. We'd never make it past the escorts. Voss's grin widened. Who said we need to? The bridge fell silent. The realization hit them all at once. You're suggesting we. The XO trailed off. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Voss turned to his comms officer. Patch me through to the Vanguard. The image of Captain Armin Hale flickered onto the holoscreen. A grizzled veteran with a scarred face and the demeanor of a man who had seen one too many wars. Voss didn't waste time. Captain, I need your ship to do something incredibly stupid. Hale snorted. That's what I'm here for. Voss outlined his plan. The Vanguard, one of Earth's heaviest battleships, would charge straight at the enemy fleet, acting as a distraction. The Council would be so focused on stopping it that they wouldn't notice the Indomitable slipping through the chaos. Hale grinned. Hell, if I'm going out, might as well make it spectacular. You're not going out, Voss said flatly. You just need to hold long enough for us to get a clean shot. No promises, Hale replied before cutting the channel. Voss exhaled. All ships full burn. Vanguard leads the charge. We follow the wreckage. The engines roared to life. From the bridge, Voss watched as the Vanguard accelerated straight into the enemy formation. Council warships scrambled to intercept. The battle erupted in full force. The Vanguard took a brutal pounding, absorbing railgun fire and plasma bolts that should have shattered it 100 times over. But it kept going. Its guns never stopped firing. More and more enemy ships turned their attention toward it. Now, Voss ordered. The Indomitable and its strike group slipped through the madness, weaving between wreckage, darting past burning husks of destroyed ships. No one noticed them. No one realized what was coming. The enemy flagship loomed ahead. Its shields untouched, its defenses pointed outward, expecting a frontal assault. They didn't expect the knife sliding between their ribs. Voss's voice was calm. All weapons fire. The void ignited. Railgun rounds, plasma torpedoes, and disruptor beams tore through the flagship's flank, bypassing its defenses entirely. The ship lurched, its energy grid overloaded in seconds. Their shields failed. Then, the Indomitable's main gun fired. A concentrated burst of kinetic energy punched through the enemy flagship's core. The ship shuddered. Then, it detonated. The explosion lit up the battlefield, sending shockwaves that ripped through nearby ships. The enemy fleet froze. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. Then, like a dying beast realizing it had already lost too much blood, the Council's remaining ships turned and ran. The battle was over. A few cheers broke out across the bridge, but Voss wasn't celebrating. He turned to his comms officer. Get me Hale. There was a pause. Then static. Voss's stomach twisted. Seconds later, a weak signal broke through. Hale's voice was hoarse. Still here, you son of a bitch. Voss chuckled. Told you weren't going out. Yeah, well. Hale coughed. You owe me a drink. Voss's smirk faded. You okay? Silence. Then, Hale's voice softened. We lost a lot of good people. Voss exhaled. Yeah. He let that hang in the air. They had won, but it had cost them. It always did. A transmission came through, one of the last surviving Valoran generals. His voice was heavy, but grateful. You came for us. Voss nodded. We don't abandon our own. The Valoran's voice was thick with emotion. The Council will never forget this. Voss's expression hardened. Neither will we. He turned to his bridge crew, speaking one final order. Set course for Earth. Let's go home. As the fleet moved away from the wreckage of Valoris Prime, a new legend was written into the stars. The silence of space was deceptive. In reality, there was no calm, only the tension before the next strike. The battle had shifted. The Council's fleet had taken a devastating blow, their command structure obliterated, but they were far from defeated. They weren't just regrouping, they were preparing for something worse. Sir! The tactical officer's voice cut through the low hum of the bridge. Enemy movement, they're forming a new line. Voss's gaze locked onto the holodisplay. The remaining Solari warships, battered but still formidable, had regrouped into a dense, overlapping defensive grid. A kill box. Any attempt to push forward would be met with a concentrated wall of fire. His XO exhaled. They're done playing games. They think if they dig in, we won't have the guts to push, Voss muttered. His fingers tapped against the armrest of his chair, his mind already pulling apart the enemy's formation. They're betting that we'll hesitate. That we won't take the risk. The XO folded his arms. Maybe we should. We've already crippled them. The smart move is to regroup, rearm, hit them later. Voss shook his head. No. We finish this now. His officers hesitated. The fleet had already stretched itself to the limit. Hull breaches, dwindling ammunition, exhausted crews, they weren't in shape for a prolonged engagement. But they didn't need prolonged. They needed decisive. Voss leaned forward. Comms, open a direct line to the fleet. The channel buzzed to life. Across the network, battle-scarred captains, bruised but unbroken, waited for their next orders. You see them, Voss said, his voice steady. They're wounded, just like we are. But they think they can outlast us. They think we're going to hold back. That we're going to hesitate. But we are not them. The bridge crew listened in silence. They fight for their empires, their politics, their council laws. We fight for something stronger. We fight for our brothers and sisters beside us, for those they've slaughtered, for the ones who can't fight back. We do not hesitate. We do not stop until they are nothing but debris. The comms line was dead silent. Then, one by one, voices rang out in acknowledgement. Voss smirked. Weapons hot. We're taking this fight straight into their throats. A heartbeat of silence. Then, the fleet surged forward. The first salvo came hard and fast. The Council's grid unleashed a storm of plasma and railgun fire, a solid wall of death. Smaller ships disintegrated in the first impact, their shields crumbling under the relentless onslaught. Evasive maneuvers! The XO shouted. The Indomitable twisted through the chaos, its anti-missile batteries firing in every direction, detonating projectiles before they could find their mark. But the Council had the numbers. A heavy cruiser lurched ahead of the formation, its main cannon charging a superheated plasma burst, locking onto the Indomitable's bridge. Brace! The plasma lance fired. A smaller frigate cut in front of the shot, sacrificing itself in a blinding explosion. The bridge rattled from the shockwave. Someone shouted in pain as they were thrown across the deck. Voss barely blinked. He turned to the weapons officer. Return fire. Railguns sang their violent song, ripping through the cruiser's exposed thrusters. The ship listed sideways, its own plasma cannons shattering under cascading explosions. The Council's line began to crack. Sir! The tactical officer's voice was urgent. They're preparing a last-ditch counterattack. Something big. Voss's eyes narrowed. What are they? Then he saw it. A Council dreadnought, larger than anything else on the field, was charging its core reactor. They're gonna self-destruct, the XO realized. Voss's stomach dropped. The enemy wasn't retreating. They were going down swinging, taking everything with them. Sir! If that thing goes critical, half the fleet is gone. For the first time in the battle, there was no good answer. No clever trick. No impossible maneuver. Just the brutal reality of too little time and too many lives on the line. And then the calm crackled. A voice. Weak, strained, but familiar. Hail here! I've got a shot. Voss's breath hitched. He had forgotten about the Vanguard. It was still operational, barely. Hail, your ship is falling apart. A ragged chuckle. Yeah, well. Ain't got much left to lose. The display showed the Vanguard drifting, its hull shattered, but its main railguns still functional. If I fire straight into that reactor core, Hale coughed, I can detonate it before it reaches critical mass. Voss hesitated. This was suicide. You won't have time to get clear, Voss said quietly. Hale exhaled. Tell me something I don't know. Voss clenched his jaw. You don't have to do this. You're right, Hale said. I don't. But someone has to. Voss exhaled, pressing his forehead against his fist. Fire when ready. On the display, the Vanguard's main cannon glowed white-hot. Hale's voice came through one last time. See you on the other side, Voss. The shot fired. It punched through the dreadnought's core. The enemy's ship erupted in a blinding supernova, a chain reaction ripping through what remained of the Council's fleet. The Vanguard was caught in the blast. And then silence. The battlefield was empty. The enemy fleet was gone. Voss sat motionless, his grip white-knuckled on the chair. The comms officer whispered, Sir, we've won. No one spoke. The weight of it was too heavy. Finally, Voss closed his eyes. He took a slow breath. Then, he straightened in his chair. He opened a channel to the fleet. This is Commander Voss, he said, voice steady. Hale just bought us our victory. We honor him by ensuring it wasn't for nothing. He turned to the navigation officer. Set course for Earth. The fleet, scarred and battered, turned toward home. A legend had been written in fire and sacrifice. And the galaxy would never forget it. The silence on the bridge was thick. No cheers. No celebration. Just the hollow, suffocating weight of what had been won, and what had been lost. Voss sat still, his hands clenched into fists against the armrests of his chair. The battlefield beyond the viewscreen was littered with debris, shattered Council warships drifting aimlessly, their once mighty fleet obliterated. But the Vanguard, Hale's ship, was gone, reduced to nothing but vapor in the explosion that had sealed their victory. The comms officer hesitated before speaking. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the remaining enemy ships. They're surrendering. Surrendering. Voss exhaled through his nose, his voice level but razor-sharp. Patch them through. A screen flickered to life, revealing the pale, sweat-slicked face of Admiral Threxus, the highest-ranking Council officer still breathing. Blood dripped from a gash across his forehead, and his uniform was in shreds. He looked nothing like the arrogant, untouchable rulers that had broadcast their threats across the stars. His voice was hoarse, shaking. This is madness. Do you realize what you've done? Voss tilted his head slightly. I know exactly what I've done. Threxus swallowed. The Council, it will not forget this. You think this is the end? No, Commander. This is only the beginning of a war you cannot win. Voss leaned forward, his voice a cold whisper. The war started when you turned Valoris Prime into a graveyard. When you thought you could erase an entire people, and no one would stop you. We stopped you. Threxus's eyes twitched. The Council is dead, Voss cut in. Your fleet is in ruins. Your reinforcements? Obliterated. Your homeworld? Gone. And now, the last of you are waving a white flag. He let that sink in before his voice turned razor-sharp. So tell me, Threxas, what exactly do you think the Council's going to do about it? The Admiral's lips parted, but no words came. Voss let the silence linger before continuing, his tone colder than space itself. I could wipe you out. Every last one of you. I should. It's what you did to the Valoran. It's what you would have done to us. And yet, he tapped his fingers against the armrest. I'm going to give you something you didn't deserve. Threxas swallowed. And that is? Voss leaned in, his expression unreadable. A warning. The Admiral blinked, confusion flickering across his face. Voss's voice remained calm, controlled, but there was a fire beneath it, the kind of fire that never died. If you, or whatever's left of the Council, so much as breathe in the direction of Earth or its allies again, if you even think about retribution, there won't be warnings next time. His lips curled slightly. There won't even be time for surrender. Threxas's throat bobbed as he nodded stiffly. Good, Voss said, then glanced at his comms officer. Cut the feed. The transmission snapped off. The bridge was quiet for a long moment before the XO spoke. Sir, you really letting them walk away? Voss exhaled, the weight of command pressing against his ribs. They'll run back to whatever scraps of power they can find. But the Council is finished. They just don't know it yet. The XO's jaw tightened. And Hale? Voss looked at the empty space where the Vanguard had been. His chest ached, but he forced the emotion down. We honor him the only way that matters. The XO nodded. We finished the mission. Voss stood, straightening his uniform. Set course for Valoris Prime. We came to stop a massacre. He glanced at the burning planet below. Now we rebuild. The fleet shifted course, leaving behind the wreckage of war. As the first rescue teams deployed, a message was sent across the stars. Not a warning. Not a threat. A fact. Earth had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The smell of scorched metal and burning debris lingered in the air, even through the sterilized filters of the Indomitable's bridge. The fleet hung in orbit over Valoris Prime, watching the aftermath of both salvation and destruction. The war was over. The Valoran were still alive. But the weight of what had been done settled deep into Commander Elias Voss's bones. His comms officer turned to him. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission. Valoran survivors. Voss nodded. Patch it through. The holodisplay flickered to life, revealing High Warlord Kavar, leader of what was left of the Valoran people. His once magnificent armor was shattered, smeared with soot and blood. His deep-set eyes burned with something raw, grief, rage, and something else. Human. His voice rumbled, hoarse but unbroken. You came. Voss met his gaze without flinching. We don't abandon our own. Kavar exhaled, the weight of survival pressing on his shoulders. Our cities are gone. Our warriors slain. The Council came to make an example of us. His hand curled into a fist. They would have succeeded, if not for you. Voss remained silent. This wasn't a moment for words. Kavar straightened, squaring his broad shoulders. We are a warrior people, Commander Voss. We do not beg, and we do not forget debts. His voice hardened. We owe you more than we can ever repay. Voss didn't hesitate. Then stand with us. Kavar tilted his head. You would have us serve? Not serve. Voss's voice was unwavering. Fight. Fight with us. The war isn't over, Kavar. The Council may be shattered, but they're not extinct. They'll retreat, regroup, and when they do, they'll come back meaner and more desperate than before. His fingers tapped against the console. And we'll need allies when that happens. Kavar studied him for a long moment before nodding. You saved what was left of us, Commander. And what remains of the Valoran will fight beside you, until the stars themselves are ash. Voss allowed himself a small, tired smirk. Good. The transmission ended. The bridge was quiet. His XO exhaled. You really think the Council will come back? Voss's smirk faded. I know they will. He gestured toward the wreckage drifting in orbit. This is just the beginning. We humiliated them. We shattered their power. But monsters like the Council don't just disappear. He exhaled slowly. They evolve. The Exo frowned. So what do we do? Voss turned his gaze to the stars. We get ready. Another transmission came through. This time, it was Earth High Command. The Admiral's face was grim. Commander Voss. You went against direct orders, led an unsanctioned engagement, and dragged Earth into an all-out war against the Council. Voss's expression didn't change. Yes, sir. The Admiral leaned forward. And you won. Silence stretched. Voss arched a brow. Permission to speak freely? The Admiral sighed. At this point, Commander, I don't think I could stop you. Voss leaned back, folding his arms. Let's not pretend the brass didn't want this outcome. You didn't tell us to stand down. You told us to observe. And what we observed was genocide. His jaw tensed. So we acted. And now, the Council is broken, the Valoran are our allies, and Earth is stronger than it's ever been. The Admiral studied him. Do you know what this means, Voss? Voss met his gaze, unflinching. It means humanity just stepped out of the shadows. We're not the upstart species anymore. We're a power. The Admiral nodded slowly. That's exactly what it means. A pause. Then, and it also means you're too dangerous to ignore. Voss smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. The Admiral sighed, rubbing his temples. I should court-martial you. But you won't. A dry chuckle. No. I won't. The Admiral's expression darkened. You made enemies, Voss. Not just in the Council. In the Union. In the corporations who profited from neutrality. People are afraid of what happens next. And fear breeds war. Voss nodded. Then we'd better start preparing. The Admiral studied him for a long moment before his lips pressed into a thin line. God help us all. The transmission ended. Voss exhaled and turned back to the bridge. Set course for Earth. We've got work to do. Engines roared to life. The fleet turned, leaving behind the ashes of a dying empire. In the void of space, a new legend was forged. Humanity had spoken. And the galaxy would never be the same.